Hey everybody, Mike here. So I want to take a second to go over this Fluke meter that's been in my toolbox for as long as I've been out of high school. I bought this back in 2004 when I first started college, and this was by recommendation of someone who was kind of a trusted mentor at that point in time in my life, who told me to basically get a meter and buy it once, cry once. This thing would last and grow with me as I progressed in my career. Now I've switched careers multiple times over the years. Every time I've switched careers, I've always needed some kind of a multimeter in the industry that I've chosen to go into. With that being said, I've owned this thing for 20 years now, and this is still my go-to meter. I do have a couple others that I own. This has been the meter that's been through just about everything with me in my life, and it just keeps on ticking. I can't go into this thing in great detail. A lot of you are probably way further into electronics than I am. If you're looking for a very detailed review that goes into a lot of the specs, this probably isn't the review that you'll want to watch. So if you're just getting into the industry of some sort and you're looking for a multimeter and you need a good testimony as to something that's going to last you, I'm here to tell you that after the last 20 years, this meter's been with me the whole time, and I highly doubt I'll ever need another meter in the future. Now when it comes to this meter versus some of the others, one of the key things I've always noticed is the contrast on this display itself is a lot darker and more black than a lot of the other meters I've seen and come across. In fact, I've got one of my other little backup meters here. Believe it or not, this one's got a pretty good contrast on it as well. It's kind of a bad comparison. Some of the little knockoff meters that I've had over the years haven't had that contrast. If you're getting a super bright environment or you're trying to use this outside, that display becomes kind of hard to see. That's never been the case with this meter here. Running through your dials here on the front of this thing, obviously if you turn that thing off, that's your first position. Your next two positions are your voltage, whether you're testing AC or DC voltage. Then you get up into your millivolts, your resistance, diode checker, and then over here into your amperage. And then across the top here, you've got a bunch of various different functions. Over the years, I've kind of used some of those off and on. Min max has been the one, and range have kind of been the two that I've gone to for most things. But outside of that, I haven't had the need to use this thing to its full capability. Now this thing does have a backlit display as well. So if you're getting a dark environment, you can hit that backlight and it will display so you can see this thing at night. And across the bottom, you've got your ports just about like every other multimeter does, where you've got your amperage, milliamps, your ground, and then your voltage and resistance checker here. Now these are the leads that came with this unit 20 years ago. I've got other leads as well I'll use based on different situations I find myself in. These are still the most used leads, and they're, to this day, 20 years later, they're still good. It also comes with this set of alligator clips as well. When you first get these, I remember these leads being somewhat stiff. Over the years, they have kind of broken in a little bit, and they're a lot easier to use than they were back in that day. I think that's probably what attributes to why these have lasted so long. They're a good high quality lead with a nice solid insulation on them, unlike some of the other leads that I've had over the years or seen where they go bad pretty much within the first couple of years or so. Now to give you an idea, I'm gonna turn this camera around. I want to show you guys a couple things here. Now using just a couple things I found in the garage, I want to show you how this display acts and it operates. So if I basically, what I've got here is a little diode. We're gonna go ahead and try to check this diode here and see if we can get that thing to show you on the screen what this looks like. Put it on there like so, and there's your diode reading. If I flip this thing around, I'm not showing a reading on that, so that's still a good diode. Now if I flip it over one to the left here to the resistance, I do have a resistor here. Now obviously, if you're electronics, you know each one of these little colored bands, if I can get to focus, each one of these little colored bands has a variable, and you can tell how big this resistor is just based on the color bands alone. I don't remember that after all these years. My simple way of checking is just to stick it up here to a set of leads, and you can see your resistance reading on that resistor. That's another way to use this meter here. What's also nice is if I need to go around and check outlets throughout the house, I can just stick my leads into that receptacle and see what the reading is on that plug itself. So that would be using your AC voltage setting right here, like you see. Now you can also check DCs. I used this a ton back in the day when I was still working at an automotive dealership. This was my go-to meter back in that day as well. And by putting that to DC there, you can very easily check, battery voltages and different circuitry within the car. Now I have a little power supply I built here years ago, actually around the time that I bought this meter. So this thing's been with me just as long. And this is what I've always used on my test bench to test various electronics. But you can see by going through here and checking voltage on DC as well. I've got a 5-volt port here. This one here is a 12-volt port. And then I've got a variable here as well, which is what this knob here checks for me. By running this up, you can see how the voltage changes and so forth. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of idea how that display works. This thing's capable of so much more than that. That, like I said, this just barely scratches the surface as to what this thing's capable of. Now when it comes to durability of this thing, this has a really nice hard plastic case on this thing, and the texture on it has always held up great as well. Next thing to keep in mind, I've been in and out of all kinds of different situations where I've had gasoline and things in my hands of that nature while I've been working with this meter, and you can see all the writing and the spots on here are still almost like they were when they were brand new. Not to mention how many times I've wiped wiped this thing off and cleaned it up, it's not worn off any of the writing on the front of this meter yet. Now, the one thing I'd like to tell you, maybe to keep on hand even as a backup, is when it comes to measuring amperage, you have a 10 max rated fused link inside of this meter. I've actually popped that little fuse inside of this thing a few times, so I got in the habit of keeping these little fuses on hand. Now, there's two different fuses in there. One is a 440 milliamp fuse. It's this blue one here that's inside here, and then you've also got this little 11 amp fuse as well, the one that I've actually popped a few times. I keep a few of these on hand. I only keep one of the little smaller milliamp fuses on hand. So you can pick this up the same time you buy your meter or later on as well. But just know that these are available, and it's pretty easy to get inside this meter and swap those out. It's just 3 screws that come out of the back. You pop the thing apart, replace your fuses, and you're back working again. Well, I was trying to keep this review a little bit shorter. I think it's going to be a little bit on the longer side, and I apologize for that. Hopefully I gave you a little bit of an in-depth view as to the basic operations of this meter. This meter has always been considered pretty much the top of the line, and it's, in my opinion, the meter to beat, which is why this Fluke 87 hasn't really been changed since the day it came out over 20 years ago. If you're looking for a good quality meter and you're really looking just to buy that meter once, feel free to look into this Fluke 87. I really do feel like it's worth the money invested when it comes to something like this. And if that price tag's just a little bit too hefty for you, Fluke's got several other models available that might fit your budget just a little bit better. That's all I've got for you today, guys. I appreciate you taking the time to watch this. We'll catch you guys on the next one.